to Module 8. So with that, I would like to introduce Matthew. So Matthew Hanson served in the DC offices of Northrop Grumman, representing their portfolio on advanced technologies on the Hill, as well as the Pentagon, NASA, NSF, NIH, and other government agencies. He is the co-founder of Integrated Medical Systems, and he represented his company and industry's interest in advanced medical technologies on Capitol Hill, including with the FDA and Homeland Security. And as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, his last assignment was crafting space policy with the Office of the Secretary of the Air Force. So looking forward to hearing more about your story and your transition to your current role. Would you like to share your screen, or would you like me to advance your slides?
I'd be happy to share my screen.
Great, thanks. Go ahead. All
right. Thank you, Adriana, and thank you, Harinder, for the opportunity to speak to the students today. I'm going to go a little bit quickly in the interest of time, because I'm not the meat of your series today. I'm more of the soul of the series today. There's one takeaway from the slides I'm going to buzz through today is enjoy it and be a human being when you get into the policy role. All policy is done through personal relationships and trust, just like everything else in life. So if you can go into it and not just be the wonk in the room, you'll gain a lot more traction. So that's kind of the bottom line message, but I'm going to do this with a couple of real life examples and some stories to share with you on that. So let me jump to my screen. Okay, so as Adriana mentioned, I'm Matthew Hanson. I'm the Director of New Ventures here at UCI's Beall Applied Innovation. Beall Applied Innovation is a business unit of UCI. We report to the Provost's office, just like any of the 16 schools do, but we're not a school. We offer no degrees. What we offer is co-curricular experiential programming and innovation and entrepreneurship, creativity, all to raise both the level of the innovation culture on campus, but also to engage us more deeply in the ecosystem around us, the businesses, et cetera. But in working with Harinder in the past on a couple of projects, he mentioned you were having this session, and I told a couple of stories about my time on Capitol Hill, and we just thought it might be interesting to give this sort of personal perspective on policy and advocacy for STEM scientists. Now, I'm not going to read every point on my slide, but I'll hit some of the high points. I have a doctorate in aerospace engineering, even though I ended up in the life sciences and medical technology and now in academia. So I was a research scientist. I worked in a lab, I published research papers, etc. And that equipped me to be the wonk in the room, as I mentioned, when I went in to have to discuss policy matters with government officials. I have my MBA from Chapman University. My career, as Adriana mentioned, I started in the US Air Force, retired as a lieutenant colonel, worked on the GPS navigation satellites, and worked on policy related to space applications out of the Pentagon. When I went to Northrop Grumman on the stealth bomber program, I broadened my portfolio to include all of their advanced technologies and represented those on Capitol Hill. And then when I spun out my own company in medtech, I did the same thing, only from the civilian side. So I've had a flavor of it in government, industry, and small business. After my startup, I went to Beckman Coulter, a medical technology company. I then went over full-time at Chapman University to run their entrepreneur programs, and then joined the team here at UCI about 2 years ago. On a personal side, I'm a husband, and I point that out because this will impact your relationships with your significant others when you go away to Capitol Hill or Sacramento or even the local government offices, because you're helping to shape what impacts everybody else, you, your neighbor, your family, etc. I am a father of 5 plus 5. I have 5 of my own. I recently remarried, have 5 stepchildren. 2 of those pictured here, Genevieve and Grayson, graduated from UCI, so I'm an anteater parent. I'm also a singer, songwriter, and guitarist, and you say, well, who cares? Well, again, it goes to this thread of being a human being. Dr. Francis Collins, director of the NIH, pictured there, he's a singer, songwriter, guitarist. And he actually did an ad campaign as one of the rock stars of science, literally. because he writes music and plays and stuff like that. So if you have these other skill sets or hobbies or interests that you don't think apply when you go to talk to these people, you're mistaken. If you bring your whole self to the table, all your hobbies, all your interests, all your personal attributes, you have something to talk about other than the science aspect. And that helps build a relationship, and the relationship helps build the advocacy that you're seeking. That top picture there of me holding a dummy was not from my Air Force days. I was an extra in Steven Spielberg's movie called 1941. And I throw that in there again because it's something I can talk about when I'm not talking policy around the dinner table. So bring your whole person to the exercise of advocating for policy. A little disclaimer, there is a distinction between your role as a technical expert and a lobbyist. A lobbyist is someone who legally must register with the United States Senate as someone who's going to go in there and try and influence the spending of money. So it's all tied to, if you're asking for money, you probably need to register as a lobbyist. If you're just going as the technical expert, you don't have to register as a lobbyist, and you're not a lobbyist. So I was never a lobbyist, but I always had one with me most of the time, because you want to get that extra set of eyes and ears in the room, and you want to carry the message with someone who can actually ask for legislation to be written and funding to be released. So 10.5 required skills. First of all, why is it 10.5? Because you don't actually need all of them, and which one's the half, you pick. Whichever one you don't feel the greatest strength in, call it a half. And do you need all of them? No, but the more of these you have, the better it will go. So access and influence, it is who you know, and I'll tell a little story about that in a minute. Awareness and sensitivity to current politics, and I don't mean red or blue, Democrat or Republican. I mean every human relationship, every interaction, including those you would do with policymakers, is politics. It's just the interaction of human beings, and that can go well or that can go bad. So you want to be sensitive to personal matters, personal issues, personal tastes. Yeah, you want to be sensitive to the fact you might be talking to someone from a different party, from someone who's absolutely opposed to you. So just be aware that they're not all ready and willing to have you come in and convince them to change policy. You have to overcome the current politics of the moment, as well as the larger national and global politics. You want to go in not just to be the technical expert, but go in with a willingness to listen and learn, because if you don't, you'll miss out. You need to learn how the whole policy works, who's involved, so that you can follow through on your pursuit of the policy that you're trying to get created. Clearly, as a technical person, you will likely need to be able to distill your information into layman's terms. That person across the desk from you in state, local, state, or federal offices isn't going to know what you know about your topic. So you've got to make real simple examples, real simple impacts, make it something they can digest quickly and understand so that they can advocate for you. Social settings are really important too. I mentioned dinners here, but you might find yourself at a breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, picnic. You might find yourself on the lawn of the White House during their Easter egg roll. You need to be able to, again, bring your whole person to that so that you can talk about the personal matters, the likes and dislikes, the interests, the hobbies, along with your technical stuff to build that relationship. That's why they have, by the way, these government dinners every single night, even in COVID, but even more so when we're past COVID. Social settings, public speaking. You might be talking across the table to a staff member who then asks you to talk to the congressman or senator, who then asks you to talk to a caucus, which is a group of congressmen and senators who focus on a specific topic. So you might find yourself quickly in front of a group of people doing the same thing you were trying to do with just one person. So develop your public speaking skills. You don't have to be a whiz, you just have to be able to hold your own and come across both personal and professional. You will, of course, have private speaking engagements with government officials, industry leaders, international visitors, and their staff. And I should have like double, triple underlined staff, because they're the ones who do all the work, and they're the ones you're going to spend the most time with. And that's okay, because they are literally the ones who do all the work. the leaders, the congressmen and senators, et cetera, sign the legislation and they, they vocalize it in cabinet sessions, but it's all the work is done by their staff. So treat their staff with love and respect and care. Make your stories personal, inspiring, and persuasive. Again, it's your whole person. You're talking to a human being who deserves your respect on the opposite side of that desk, but they're a human being and they're going to be motivated not just mentally, but physically, emotionally, spiritually about what you're trying to tell them. So tie it all together. I think it was Aristotle that listed those four as how to be persuasive speakers, to bring all of that to the table to make your point. Be prepared to speak to the media. You could walk down the steps of the Capitol building and all of a sudden somebody puts a microphone in front of your mouth and you're on record. So just mentally prepare to stick to your basic points and don't go off on personal beliefs, etc., in front of the media. Just stick to your technical points. I was a former member of the military. Maybe you're not, probably you're not, and that's not really a requirement, but what would help is if you develop this technical, administrative, and social skills as early in your career as possible, because it all translates into your ability to influence policy. And I put it last, not because it's last in importance, but technical expertise isn't enough. If you can't explain it and convey and convince and persuade, doesn't matter how smart you are. It really doesn't. Let's see. Oh, I was going to tell a story back here. So the top picture, that's myself next to former Congressman C.W. Bill Young. He's since deceased, but he was the most powerful man in Congress. You can tell by the picture outside of his window. He had a direct view of the Capitol. He led the Appropriations Committee, which is the only committee in Congress which can release money. So he was the key guy, held the purse strings, so to speak, of taxpayer money. The gentleman we're talking to there is my colleague, my lobbyist, Jim Meadows. Jim had knowledge and access and influence to get to this very prominent member of Congress because he saved his life. It's personal relationships. If you need someone to give you access and influence, find someone who knows them personally and get them on your side. Now, a lot of lobbyists do. That's why they're lobbyists. They know these people personally. So lobbyist isn't a bad word. It's someone who helps you get the ear of the people that you're trying to influence. The bottom picture there is just a similar story. That's Jim Meadows and I again. That's Congresswoman Napolitano from California. No relation to Janet Napolitano of the UC system. But again, it was his personal relationship with her that allowed us to gather her into this intimate discussion about technology policy. 9 things to know or to be aware of. When I talk about federal government examples, it applies to the state and local pretty much. They're pretty much modeled after each other. Government officials are worthy of respect because of their role and their position and their power, but they are just people, so don't be afraid of them. Be cordial and respectful, personable and professional. Everybody eats. Sounds like a strange bullet, but if you go to a meeting and they've run out of time and they can't meet with you, but they're walking, to have a snack or a cup of coffee at the cafeteria, ask if you can go with them. Or if they don't have any time in their schedule at all, ask them, are you having lunch today? Could we talk over lunch? Again, it helps make it more personal and gives you an opportunity to get their ear. Do be aware that if you do have the privilege of speaking to a member of Congress or a senator at either state or federal level, they don't think about you very much. Maybe 15 minutes a year, if at all, because the staff does everything. But if you get an audience with them, make your 3 main points, be pleasant and professional and personable, and that will help carry the day when it comes down to them approving the certain policy. September 30th, that's the end of the government fiscal year, the last day they can spend money for that year. They often have money left over. So if your policy program needs funding, it doesn't hurt to bring up in June or July, hey, we need some funding, and if there's any left, if it looks like there's going to be any left on September 30th, please, keep us, include us in. I'll share a story about that a little bit later. Again, if you miss a meeting or they can't meet with you, but they're walking down the hallway, stairwells, or elevators, go for it. Have a meeting. Discuss times with them. At anything, you built the relationship and you've got something to start with later. Potomac fever in Washington, D.C. is a real thing. This is where if you've been there too long, you will realize that there are two opposing sides to everything, and both sides have 100 levels of justification for it. And then you will be aware of it, and you'll be able to argue either side of it, and you'll be so confused you don't know where you stand. So that's Potomac fever. So you gotta stick to your guns and your beliefs and everything, because there's a lot of convincing arguments on Capitol Hill. You want to be able to argue both sides, as I mentioned, because if you can argue your opponent's side in a discussion, you are equipped to be able to address them. So, know your enemy well, if you will. Rubber chicken isn't really bad. What I mean by that is all these dinners and everything in DC and in Sacramento, they're called the rubber chicken circuit because every dinner you'll go to is exactly the same. It's rice pilaf, a rubber chicken, and let's see, coffee, tea, and some sort of chocolate souffle. It's the same meal always. So, but it's not always that bad. Just realize you'll get chicken. So a couple of stories, but let me do a time check. How am I doing here, Adriana?
You're fine, keep going.
Okay, all right. Don't be afraid to cut me off. I'll try to keep these short. But these stories illuminate some of the points I just brought up, but again, they bring it down to more human levels. So you realize, again, that you're not speaking to some unreachable person. These are just human beings that have a particular role to play that you need to respect. So how to entertain a visiting Russian scientist who has no clothes and no money. So I was in Washington, DC. USC calls me up and they say, we have a visiting Russian scientist coming in tonight. Can you host him to a dinner? I said, sure. So I got some of the details and they said, oh, by the way, when he got off the plane, he was robbed. He has no clothes and no money. So I had to go take him and buy him clothes and get him some money. It was a very strange situation. And so I talked to my boss. I said, hey, I've got this guy. I want to take him to a dinner tonight. Is there a dinner I can take him to? Yeah. There's a dinner tonight for President Bush. I said, oh, great. So we take him to this dinner for President Bush, and he meets the President of the United States, and he's beside himself. He can't imagine that he got off a plane, got robbed, and then the same night he meets President Bush. So we take a bunch of pictures of him and President Bush, and I go to mail them to him in Russia. And lo and behold, he never gets them. I send him like 2 or 3 times. He never gets them because they're always confiscated by the party. So anyway, he never got any evidence of that. Look calm when kissed and then get that Christmas card. So life happens. One of the largest champions for the civilian medical technology policy I was pursuing was Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez from right here in Orange County. And I was standing in the lobby of one of the congressional buildings, and she gets off the elevator, and my friend Jim says, Congresswoman Sanchez, this is Dr. Hanson from Integrated Medical, the program and policies that you're supporting. And she wraps her arms around me and kisses me on the lips. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? And then she apologized. She said, look, I'm just a huggy type of person. I'm like, that's fine. And that Christmas, then I get a Christmas card and open it up, and it's a Christmas card from Loretta Sanchez with her in silk pajamas lying in bed saying, wishing you were here. And you open it up and it's all tongue in cheek and it's, it's just a little bit edgy. But my wife is like, who is this person? So again, all kinds of weird stuff will happen because it's life, it's people. How to become Secretary of the Army. So my boss and I are working in Washington. We're all wearing dirty, scrubby clothes because we're cleaning out our offices one day. And he gets a call and he comes back and he says, hey, Matt, I got to leave right away. I got to go to the White House. I said, what's up? He says, well, they're going to name me Secretary of the Army today. I said, well, how does that happen? He said, well, the current Secretary of the Army just got arrested for shoplifting and they need somebody to step in right away. So they're making me Secretary of the Army. So be aware, this stuff happens. How to win friends and influence people. It's who the other person knows. So I'm at a function and I meet Carl Sagan. You might remember him. He's an astrophysicist from Princeton who had the television show Cosmos and had this search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So I went up to him and we chatted a little bit, and to recognize the fact that we met, I handed him a lapel pin of the stealth bomber. So I said, Dr. Sagan, I'd like to give you this as a gift of our meeting. And he said, he takes it and he sticks it in my face and he goes, I want you to know, I hate this program. You're stealing billions from basic research. You're destroying lives with these military weapons. And he just tore me upside down and backwards. But then he paused, he got his breath, and he says, but I'm going to accept this token because my grandson loves this program. Can I have more of these? What else can you tell me about the stealth bomber? So it ties back to, in this case, his family relationships affected his, basically his policy positions too. So it does come down to human stuff. How not to win friends and influence people. So I go into a meeting at the NIH and I introduce myself and the guy goes, oh, so you work for Northrop Grumman? I said, yeah. And he goes, who do you work for there? And I said, well, I work for, so-and-so. He explodes, literally explodes, jumps out of his chair, throws me out of the office. And I'm clueless. And so I go back to Northrop and I said, I just got thrown out of a building before I even said anything. And they said, well, who was it? And I said, well, it was this person. They said, oh, he's the guy we fired last year because all of his credentials are phony. He has no degrees. He has no affiliation with anything. And he's a big fake. I said, well, how did he get a government position? He goes, same way he got a job at Northrop. He lied. So you run into bad folks too. Be at the right place at the right time. So I mentioned sometimes your policy initiatives need some funding behind them. So I went to the Defense Department one day, met one of my colleagues there, and he says, hey, let's go get some sushi lunch. So we went to lunch and we're talking. He goes, you did a great job on that last initiative we had. What do you think of doing next? So I explained it. He goes, how much money do you need? I said, we're thinking about $3.5 million. He goes, okay. I said, what do you mean, okay? He goes, send me an email about it and I'll write you a contract for $3.5 million. So it does sometimes comes down to who you know and who you built a relationship with. Similarly, I had a meeting in the DoD with an office that I'd never been to before. I never met the guy. I sort of forced my way in to have lunch with him because everybody eats, like I said. So I get there, I fly red eye overnight, I land in DC, I go to his office and I said, hey, I'm here for a meeting. He goes, hey, sorry, I know you just flew in, but I don't have any time to meet with you. I said, well, are you walking down the hallway? He goes, yeah. So we're walking down the hallway. And he says, well, how much money do you need? I said, well, we need about $1.5 to $2 million. And so he turns to this other guy that's a stranger to me. And he says, how much money do we have left in the account? He said, well, we got about 1.2 million. And he looks at me and he goes, do you want 1.2 million? I said, I'll take it. So about 20 minutes, got $1.2 million for our initiative. The last one goes back to this September 30th, the end of the year, where they have to spend money to get it off the books. Literally, September 30th, about 9:30 at night here. I'm sorry, that wouldn't have worked out. It went to about 8:30 at night here, 11:30 in DC. This guy calls me up and he says, hey, I understand you have this program. Wondered if you needed any money for it. I said, we always need money. He said, well, I can write you a contract tonight for $3 million. I said, I don't understand. I said, why are you writing it? We didn't answer a solicitation. We've written no proposal. He goes, I got to spend the money. He goes, I got to get it off my books. And we'll figure out what the statement of work is later. I said, do it. So literally overnight, I got a contract for $3 million. So good stuff happens. Bad stuff happens too, but every once in a while, good stuff happens. So it always important to keep, plowing the opportunities and the relationships. Let me speed it up a little bit here. I'm waiting to speak with the Secretary of the Treasury, and I get a call on my phone, and I recognize it as the White House nurse. So I said, okay, I can't talk long. I'm waiting for the Secretary of the Treasury. And they said, well, we need some questions about this technology stuff you're pursuing. I said, fine. I said, but where are you calling from? And they said, oh, we're at Putin's residence in Moscow. We just had some downtime, so we thought we'd give you a call. I'm like, okay. And then the Secretary of the Treasury walks in. He goes, why are you on your phone? Isn't my meeting important enough? So then you got to explain, who you're talking to and all kinds of stuff. I'm in the Air Force. I'm in the Pentagon. We're working on space policy. And part of this is handling calls from concerned citizens because they get to have input to policy, right? So this one guy calls up for about the 40th time. Your radars up in the northern regions are killing my cows. And so you have to go into these long, very professional discussions about why radar doesn't kill cows. But this stuff actually really happens. So it's not cookbook by any means. Lastly, let's see, let me skip down to get asked for your autograph. If you're walking around anywhere around a political dinner or political lunch, there's usually somebody in the lobby who's trying to get the autograph of everybody who goes there just in case they're famous. So I've given my autograph a lot of times, and I tell them, look, I'm nobody. Absolutely nobody. They said, I don't care. We're getting all the autographs. So you might actually get given an autograph even though it doesn't show up anywhere. So that's sort of the personal stories from the road, the personal takeaways. Again, if you equip yourself with the sort of the requirements I had on my previous slide and be prepared to engage as a full human being into these things, your chances will increase. It's no guarantee, but your chances will increase that your policy will get in the direction that you want it to go. So Adriana, Harinder, thank you. I know that was a fire hose, but I just wanted to lighten it up a little bit and have some fun and tell some personal stories.
That's a great start. Thank you so much. I wanted to let you go through most of those because it's entertaining, but it's also really nice to hear the real stories that happen because you don't really hear that very often. It's very honest. So I have kind of two questions from the perspective of early career researchers who are listening to this and are looking to develop this experience and would look up to someone like you who has a lot of experience and sort of did very candidly talked about your stories, and so you mentioned developing relationships, which is critical, and this is something that obviously as academics we're not trained to be really proactive and go out there and just sort of put ourselves out there in front of staffers and be able to speak in the manner that you need to speak with them respectfully and all that you mentioned. So do you have advice for them to sort of develop this skill as they're, when they're starting out and coming from the bench and advocating on the Hill? How would you go about that when you're starting out?
I'd probably do three things. First of all, just develop some of the basic capabilities to be more than just a technical expert. Learn how to give public presentations, learn how to socialize. And I know those sound basic, but a lot of times we don't get those opportunities to practice that. So I would do that just on a personal level. In your current role at UCI, you can contact, I don't remember the exact title, you'll forgive me, but there is an office for government relations at UCI. And they probably have workshops that will train you on how policy is done and what the processes are. It wouldn't hurt to do that just as an elective, personal elective of your own, is to contact them, let your department chair know that you want to do this. It's part of professional development, particularly if you're very motivated down this path, is to contact them, because that's the first relationship you're going to build, is with the organization that represents the UCI in these roles. Also, the UC system has a similar office for state and government relations, and you wouldn't go to them directly. You want to go through UCI's first, but after you've built a relationship and had some interaction with the UCI office, ask if you could meet or sit in or observe or audit a meeting with the UCOP office, and then little by little they'll get to know you, you'll get to know them. They might ask you your opinion on something, and then you start to, explain who you are and what expertise you have and what policies you're interested in. And as long as you're doing this sort of hand in hand with your department chair, those are some pretty concrete steps you can take to do it. And then lastly, if you're ever given an opportunity, just take it. Learn by doing.
Yeah, I think that's very true. There's a lot of learning when you're on your feet, and just in certain situations you have to react, and you're kind of, I think so related to that, and sort of the way that scientists are trained, so we're used to sort of having a speech that, you rehearsed. And so how would you adapt that on the fly, as you say, like if you run into a representative in the elevator, that sort of thing, and quickly have to change your the way that you speak? How do you develop that skill to quickly adapt to the situation?
Again, probably two ideas. One of them would be to practice this on your friends, literally, whether it's on Zoom or walking down the steps at Aldrich Hall. Just spill out your elevator pitch, which I think I saw on your agenda of topics, right? You've given them some experience in this. So don't treat the experience they just gave you as a one-off. Practice it. try it with your significant other, try it with your next door neighbor, try it with the next person on Zoom. Just practice it and ask them when they're done. You know, after you do your 2 minutes of techno speak, ask them if they understood anything you said, and then polish it. And at one point you'll have it down enough to where, you know, you'll be able to explain it even when you're not on the podium, right? When you're just walking down the hallway or something like that. That's why those elevator pitches are so crucial, because you may only have 5 minutes, and they could be the most important 5 minutes of your life in terms of, you know, policy direction. So practice the tools that Harinder and Adriana are giving you, because they are crucial to being successful.
Adriana, can I ask one quick question before we wrap up? So Matt, thank you for, like, that was a wonderful story. And I wanted to mention to people who do not know, Adriana actually works at UCOP, like for UCOP. So in case if, you know, this is your opportunity to, you know, network with people from UCOP. But Matt, given you have such a great experience, not only in the industry, like you are part of the Entrepreneurship Center, and then you have policy knowledge, and you've been on Capitol Hill, and then you're back again. So can you talk a little bit about briefly as to like how your policy working on Capitol Hill has shaped your work right now in Entrepreneurship Center and innovation and, you know, the startup ideas?
Sure. Sometimes you pick a path in life, and life has other plans for you. So I learned a lot of the policy stuff when I was in the Air Force, never thinking I would use it outside of the Air Force, much like you might think you never use it outside of academia, but you can use it everywhere, because again, politics is just human relationships on every level, on every issue. So when I left Northrop and launched a startup company, we needed government funding. We needed both military medical policy changed to be in favor of the direction our technology was going. So leveraging those relationships I had developed in the Air Force and building new relationships, particularly with this lobbyist named Jim Meadows that I mentioned, I was able to carry that experience into my entrepreneurial life and make visits on Capitol Hill and know how to argue on behalf of the policy and the technologies that we wanted to have advanced. And that proved actually more fruitful than I would have expected. Over 10 years, we raised $70 million in government grants, which are wonderful because you never pay them back and you own all the intellectual property you develop with it. So it did pay off significantly. Now, even here in academia, I often find myself, I mean, just 2 days ago, I was advocating for government to be at the table on developing an ecosystem strategy for innovation and entrepreneurship in Orange County. Everybody said, oh, you have to have the academic institutions and the corporations at the table. And I said, don't forget the government agencies. They are the ones who have billions of dollars for startup companies. These are done through what are called Small Business Innovative Research Grants and STTR grants. And again, this is free money. And all you got to know is where's the money coming from and who's issuing it, build some relationships and apply. And and all of a sudden you've got $750,000 to advance your idea. So all of these ability to have access and influence, whether it's at national policy level or individually with your own particular policy niche that you live in, these skills will pay off in almost any environment, because government always needs to be at the table when you're talking about both policy and technology.
Great, thank you, Matt. I think that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for that intro and your stories as well. Really enjoyed it.
Well, very good. Thank you again, and good luck to everybody. It's a fun world out there. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Matt.
again.
Thank you.